Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. Some of you might recognize some of the people on this podcast. They've all been on a previous podcast. I believe all of you have been on my coding bootcamp episodes, right?
Yeah.
Except Evan.
Right. We talked about a plan for software engineers, but yeah.
Yes, it was a self-taught plan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, it's good to have everyone on. We were chatting for a little bit before the podcast episode, but today I'm making a bold statement. CS degrees are going to the wayside. In 5 years, I think CS degrees for software engineers will not be the majority of junior software engineers. I think most of them are going to lean on alternative education. So that's my statement. We're going to talk about that a bit today and give our ideas on coding boot camps and other education compared to bloated CS degrees that can take 4 to 5 years to complete. I'll get into that later. But yeah, let's jump right into it. We'll do our intros. Evan, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Evan Vaughn. I'm a software engineer at a company called Better.com in New York City. Yeah, that's about it.
Cool. How about you, Nicholas?
Yeah, so I'm a software engineer in New York. Work for a VC. Right now I'm doing a contract gig for a VC firm called Eldridge Communications. I stream on Twitch at /KarateMan John without the H. I do like data structures and algorithms and various gaming stuff. So yeah, been a software engineer for about 2 years now. So
cool. What's the main game that you play on Twitch?
I just play whatever my viewers tell me to. Right now I'm playing through like Pathologic. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we could talk about that later.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds fun. Well, definitely check out his live stream. Henry, how about you?
Hey everybody, so I'm Henry. I'm a front-end developer. I specialize in React. I'm currently learning React Native and very excited to be here today. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, for sure. So I hand selected certain people that were in my old podcasts and I kind of narrowed them down to, I think a lot of people here are going to bring, all of you are very, very intelligent, very insightful. And that's one of the reasons why I brought you back on. But I think a lot of you have great ideas for this topic. So I thought about this. I was thinking initially I wanted to bring up topics, like kind of like a little outline of what we want to go after. And I want to do this a little bit differently. I actually kind of want to hand this off to you, and I'm going to kind of like just piece in what I have to say around some of your talking points. But I think we should just get rolling with, just something with a conversation. Henry, you had mentioned that you had something to start with. What is it?
Oh man, I mean, I have a lot of ideas that I want to talk about, and I can definitely go on a rant if you want me to open up with it. But I think the biggest thing comes down to like, you got to start with the return on your investment. And you really had the biggest point there with the CS degree is very bloated. And this is coming from a person, take it with a grain of salt. I don't have a computer science degree, but any 4-year degree, I mean, yeah, I don't want a doctor that went to a boot camp. That's super concerning. I would not want to go to them. But for computer science, I mean, it just makes sense. Like, you want to get the value, what you're putting into it. If I'm getting a $40,000 4-year degree, and then ending where I still can't pass a technical interview. I just spoke to a recruiter the other day whose main concern was like, I have to be really sure because like I know so many people that have a degree and can't pass a technical interview. Like that was his main concern talking to me. So I think that's like where I would start is like the value and like what are you truly getting for how much you're investing?
Well, okay, this is good. Let's pause there. So let's compare, let's compare, because I have a lot of ideas and I'm trying to organize it all right now. Let's compare a top coding bootcamp, like the price for a top coding bootcamp compared to like a top 4-year degree at a good reputable college. And so when you compare a top coding bootcamp to a top college with a CS degree, in terms of the reputation, like you're comparing $60,000 to $70,000 per year compared to maybe like $20,000 for 3 months. And like something to keep in mind, like even just that year that it's going to take you to even complete that CS degree. I mean, you pretty much, if you're doing it full time, you don't really have time to pick up a full time job and you're usually sitting on loans. You're usually building up interest, and like it's cheaper. It's usually cheaper to pay for a coding bootcamp for 3 months than it is to kind of like for an entire just like 1 year of a CS degree. It's incredibly cheaper. So it's really, I almost want to bump it up. I think 40,000. I don't know about you, but I ended up with like in college for a 4-year degree, I ended up with like $70,000, $80,000 in debt because government loans get cut off. I highly encourage people to take advantage of scholarships, but shoot, yeah, it's the price comparison for the value that you get back on it. I feel like I'm ranting. I'm ranting right now. Go on, someone take this from me.
I mean, I wouldn't knock folks like who want that formal education, like, and that's something that's on their bucket list is like, go for it. I know when I started as a software engineer, like 7 years ago, is really more about like the networking that you got and the prestige that you got from the degree. And so coding bootcamps weren't really like a thing at the time. And then as I transitioned into tech, it's like boot camps started becoming like more and more of accepted sources of talent. And so like it took a lot of like the smaller companies to kind of like kick in that door and say, hey, these are like really good people coming out of these programs that don't necessarily have a degree, but they're like really willing to work hard. Versus like the top companies that are just looking at Carnegie Mellon or like Stanford, where like traditionally like the higher, I guess, graduates go on to be like really successful or whatever. But it's like the degree at this point is about like, the degree at this point is about like a personal accomplishment. And then like to a certain degree networking, which I feel like within that 5-year period that we start off with is going to close the gap because we have these like programs that are boot camps that are becoming more prestigious and be like, okay, if you want the top like recruits or top junior engineers, these are the programs that you look at. And that's a evolving cycle now, even within tech. So it's like tech's looking at less of the traditional like Carnegie Mellon, Stanford, and more like the smaller colleges and boot camps and like self-taught. It's really not about like the education that you like formally get. It's like how dedicated the person is to their craft. So like personal example, like I worked at companies where the colleges that I just rattled off, those were all my like coworkers, and it was cool. But then on the flip side, I've also worked at companies where most of the people were like self-taught, don't have degrees, but like are super smart, like some of the smartest people that I've ever worked with. So it's really not about like the degree of having it and saying like, oh, I'm going to be successful. It's really how far you push yourself. And I feel like with how boot camps have been structured so far and how they're evolving, it's like they are really giving folks going through them or even self-taught like that initiative to kind of like kick yourself in the ass and like learn this stuff. And like you wouldn't go into it not wanting to kick yourself in the ass and like learn this stuff. So I have a formal degree, and at this point I'm like, I got my first job because of a professor, but a lot of the stuff I learned either on my own or on the job. So
yeah, that's interesting. So do you feel like you had a CS background is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's like a mix of like design and computer science.
Gotcha. Do you feel like you had a supplement coming out of the computer science program to be able to be job ready?
Oh yeah. I mean, like my first job was at an ad agency. So like a lot of stuff that I learned like in coursework, like I was already doing, but also picking up new skills just by working with other people who knew more, and then like needing to grow as a developer. But then when I switched over into like tech and product proper, it's kind of like I did a whole bunch of like catch up because I was around people who knew about like algorithms and like O notation and all that stuff. So like I learned it just to be like, okay, I know the information, but am I using it? No. So it's I'd say in retrospect, like if I were to say like my first 3 years, it's like college was great, but then afterwards it's really like the onus was on me to learn these things. And I could have done that through like just online coursework, I guess the self-taught route. So
one thing that I've heard from like a few of my friends who have CS degrees is that a lot of the stuff that they actually use in their day-to-day, they didn't necessarily learn in college. It's a lot of learning on the job to begin with.
Yeah.
And when you really look at it, like when you're talking to recruiters, like a lot of the recruiters that I'm talking to, they care less now about like the degree and more that I have 2 years of experience already, right? Like that matters more. Like if I have no years of experience, if I've never worked in a professional setting as a developer, but I have a 4-year degree, I think that matters less than, oh, you went to a boot camp, but you've already gotten a job and you've worked in that professional setting for however long. Like that, I think just is an easier sell for like people who are recruiting for tech jobs in general. So I think that's a really big value, and like putting off like getting that you're just jumping into the water per se, and like getting that job experience on your resume, waiting 4 years because you're going through a CS degree. I think that's a high opportunity cost that you're spending.
100%. I agree with you completely. I think a big part of it too is, at least in tech in general, I feel like this probably applies to IT as well, but certainly for computer science, I get the impression that what you're learning in school is a lot of theory. And I think that tends to be the norm, whatever you're studying. Like I have a degree in psychology.
Same.
I was super passionate. I know.
Same.
I know. Trust me. I loved what I did. I was a counselor for the mentally ill for 3.5 years. It was some of the most rewarding and rich experiences I've ever had in my life. I don't regret doing what I did because, listen, I got to where I needed to be. It was life, you know what I mean? But anyways, what I was trying to say was, when I was studying psychology, I loved the idea of it. I loved the theory. I loved learning about people and saying, one day I'm going to help people. But what I realized once I was working is that I'm really a counselor 2 or 3 hours out of the day. The other 4 or 5 hours of the day, I'm pushing papers, I'm doing, it's bureaucracy. And I realized already when I was way too deep into it that like, oh, I don't actually like the entirety of the job. I just liked the idea of some of it. But with computer science, at least, and programming, I mean, there's so many opportunities now, like Evan was saying, for like self-learning, that you can kind of try it before you buy it, which I think is super, super helpful. Whereas if you go do a computer science degree, yeah, you might like it, and yeah, you like the theory, but like we've all said already, I think at some point, you end up having the degree and then you have to supplement. That's not enough. And then you don't have a lot of practical experience, and everything comes with a cost. But yeah, it's a huge opportunity cost, in my opinion. I agree with you, to do 4 years.
And I think one thing that like people will bring up, they're like, oh, but like, you're going to like the opportunity, like learning in a lecture hall or whatever is going to be like, you're going to get so much better teachers, something like that. But like MIT OpenCourseWare exists. And yes, you don't have office hours, but like you can still like MIT is a good school. You have access to all their lectures on computer science on their MIT OpenCourseWare. Like that's a huge resource that you can use. And I've like, if you want access to that theory knowledge, which there's people out there who go fang hunting. They want to get those big tech jobs, and like you need to know theory for those jobs. That the resources to learn that is out there for free. Like you don't need to go to college to learn theory is the important thing.
And I think that's what coding bootcamps taught us, is we can supplement. There's so much content online to learn that if you go to a coding bootcamp, one of the concerns is that you don't really understand the fundamentals of programming and data structures and algorithms and architecture in general. And all of this can be supplemented. Nicholas, you just gave, an idea for people that did want to supplement that. But that's, if you can get all of your education, and all of your education is equal, and you're able to learn everything that you need to know to become a successful software engineer that cares about their long-term career path, and they're going to continue diving deeper and deeper in and becoming a better software engineer. If you can get all that education for a cheaper price, what you really have to question is like, what does a computer science degree really bring? And Evan, you mentioned a couple things. I know when I went for my 4-year degree, first of all, actually, I'm just going to say this. I was in college for 7 years for my 4-year degree. I transferred over and nothing transferred over. That's like 2 years of it, but I was in there pretty much like for 5, and then I had a bunch of like extra electives. That's a long story. I moved in with an ex that didn't work out, and like that was just a mess. But basically, when you go to college, I want to talk about a couple things. There's a lot of it's still self-motivated, but like when you move out, let's talk about like a university, when you live on campus or something like that. When you move out, you're still kind of figuring out how to become self-independent, and all these habits that you built around the home that you like, living with your parents, living with your family, like you're learning way more than just the education that you're receiving. So you're learning a lot of good life habits. And I really like that about college, and that takes time. And that can be very stressful. But what I often find, I mean, like when I went to Purdue University, I think the graduation rate was like less than 50%, I'm guessing. And that's scary. Like to have like a $60,000 to $80,000 bill at the end of the day and not have anything to show for it, that is really, really scary. And so when you go to college, usually it's like people coming out of high school and they're not really ready and taking the education seriously. When you spread that education out for so long, it's hard to stay motivated after you've been in school your entire life. And so what a coding bootcamp allows you to do is condense that down and really focus you in, and they understand that you're going to be sapped of energy. Like they've kind of like narrowed it down to, I think like for immersives, like 3 months is pretty good. For part-time, 6 months is pretty good. But they've kind of narrowed it down to help you get through it without getting demotivated, without getting distracted. I just feel like it's so easy just to end up with a large college bill and not take advantages of the CS degree that it brings. And a lot of that is networking. A lot of that is like taking initiative and getting into internships, getting mentors, and just like really connecting with industry professionals. Almost no one does that in college. They just like focus on the grades. They focus on getting an A on their test. And it's a different mentality. It's a different type of software engineer that a lot of CS degrees breed. That's kind of another take on that.
I mean, but you're also like, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go for it.
You're also like expecting like 17, 18-year-olds to make a split decision about their futures, like then and there. Like, to your point, I was in college for 5 years. 2 of those years, I was actually an art major, and I was like, I don't like art anymore. So like, I was actually going to drop out until I found the program that I eventually graduated from. But it's like, I think the advantage with the program or the boot camps is that like you're entering knowing what you're getting yourself into. And usually you're at the age of kind of like being sure of that decision. Whereas in college, like to your point, like you're figuring out a bunch of stuff, like you're figuring out life, like you're figuring out how to be an adult. Like it's life stuff, and like for the moment and then for your trajectory. So it's like, there are a lot of big choices and big decisions, and like an education is just stacked right on top of that. But I feel like with boot camps, you already kind of settled and have kind of come to this decision, like mostly rationally. And it's like, okay, well, I've heard about this, and like, I think I can do this. Like, I've dabbled in it some, try before you buy. And like, you arrive at that decision without any like outside pressure.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I also changed my major several times. I started off with computer engineering. I went to computer science. I changed to business. I settled on psychology. And then when I finished my psychology degree, I decided then I wanted to do pre-med to go to medical school. So then I did an extra year before I burnt myself out. And then I said, I'm just going to graduate with psychology and see where this takes me. And then once I have some job experience, I'll come back and do my master's or PhD or whatever. But I agree with what Evan was saying. If I can go back into the past and just avoid college altogether and save myself the money, I don't know that at that point of time, I would have been ready and had the dedication to be able to commit to a boot camp, because it is a lot at once and you have to be sure that you want it. I mean, I've seen several people that go to a boot camp, and I think it's a good thing that not everyone just passes automatically, but at the same time, it is still a cost. You know, on average, I know that Iron Hack was like more or less $11,000 or $12,000, I think, if I remember correctly. So can you imagine investing that money and then finding out like halfway through, like, oh, I really just like the idea of this. And once I had to actually like sit down and have like really long days and try to hammer this all out, like now I realize that I'm not that into it. That's rough. But on the other hand,
imagine going to college for like a 4-year degree for computer science. And then you realize that you don't like computer science. Like, because I mean, CS isn't for everyone. Not everyone likes logic puzzles and building things. Imagine thinking, okay, I'm going to go to college because this is how, you get a job in this field. And like, you realize like a year or two in that you don't like it. Well, like now, I mean, where do you go from there? Because you still have like however many more years of college, and you can change majors in that. I mean, nothing wrong with changing majors, but it does your cost increases because you're there longer. The longer you're in college, the more you have to pay, and that's not something you want to really do.
At that point, it's like I felt what you're saying. It's like I had to double down. It's like I didn't know what to do, so I was like, I guess I'll change majors and try something else. And like, yeah, I'm putting myself in more debt, but it'll be worth it once I figure this out. And yeah, not using my degree today, so.
I mean, you're probably making more than you would with a psychology degree.
Oh, I was working at a nonprofit.
Yeah,
I was making double at my first job out of my boot camp.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I with my psychology degree, I volunteered at a crisis center at a nonprofit, and I know exactly how much some of the people running that were making. And I don't even know how they afforded rent. I really don't.
No, everyone was living paycheck to paycheck. It was an interesting experience there.
You know what's interesting is so I put some money down and did some consultation with a lawyer because I want to go ahead with some of these videos. And I want to be safe about it. But there are a lot of coding boot camps. And I think in the next few months, I'm probably going to put some videos out about it. A lot of coding boot camps that like to swap their statistics, and they're not very honest. They're not very transparent, like talking about like ISA, like loan or like paybacks and like job guarantees and job placements, like a lot of that data. If you really dig into it, like it's a flat out lie. A lot of coding boot camps, well, they come very, very close to lying about it, and they just squeak by just a little bit. But one thing, when I was digging into it with a few people, I noticed that it's interesting because a lot of the people that would get jobs were people that coming out of a coding boot camp, for like some of the lesser coding boot camps that had a lesser reputation, they already had like previous education, even if it was like a CS degree or it was alternative education or another coding boot camp. But when I dug into all this, I noticed that like I would say about like 60-70% of some of these coding boot camps I researched, they had CS degrees before. And it was interesting because it kind of makes sense when you stack that education, they're going to stand a better chance in the job market. But how are so many people with CS degrees going into coding boot camps? Why are they going into coding boot camps? And like, I can speak for my own cohort at Full Stack Academy. A good chunk of people had CS degrees. And that was the first time that I really thought about like how valuable is a CS degree. That was 5 years ago. I know you want to say something, Henry. Go for it.
I'm so sorry. One of the people in my cohort at Iron Hack, I met several people there, and I keep in contact with a large group of people, but there were like two people that stood out to me that to this day are probably two of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. Just in general, they absorb everything. They're constantly reading, whatever. But when it came to programming, like one of the benefits I saw to going to a boot camp was surrounding myself with people that were on that same hustle grind, that really want to work, and then meeting those two people. One of them had a computer science degree already, and he came back to this boot camp, and I'm speaking to him, and he's so like, he understands everything. And I'm like, why are you here? Because with the computer science degree, I hadn't built anything. So when people were interviewing me, I had nothing to show. And then I also have he had no networking skills. He didn't know how to put himself out there. So like he literally went to the boot camp for the sake of networking and being able to have a couple projects in his portfolio.
Wow.
But you bring up the right point. Then what was the point of the computer science degree?
And so I think that's the big concern. And I've mentored some people that have come to me with CS degrees. They have no projects to showcase. And the tricky thing is a lot of universities don't tell you this, but most of them own your projects. You don't come out with projects. That's their projects. That's their property. Ooh. And that like when they did kind of ask their advisors about that, and they were enlightened that they pretty much had nothing to show for, no portfolio to show. That's kind of scary. I mean, that for most CS degrees, like that tells you that in order to be able to showcase your skills to an employer, to many employers, I mean, you have to spend time outside of your CS degree to even show that.
Wait. So you're saying that CS degrees, like they own the rights to whatever project. So like, it's not your original IP, but like you could still show that to a recruiter for say, yes?
No, that's not what they've been telling me when they looked at their contracts.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
That's not all colleges. Because I did talk to a couple people with CS degrees, but more often than not, they couldn't showcase their projects. And maybe I should go back and look at the colleges for that.
That's very, very strange.
Yeah, that's
I don't understand why. Like that doesn't make any sense. Because a college is incentivized by having, your students do well. You want strong alumni. So I don't know why they wouldn't want their alumni to be able to use the curriculum, I guess, to showcase.
Maybe the projects aren't strong. They don't want to showcase them. No, that's probably a weak reason.
That doesn't. Yeah.
It's probably similar. I mean, it's probably a contract or a clause similar to what you're going to get at a company. Just because you build their application, just because you build their website, doesn't mean you get to showcase it on your portfolio. And I think people that work at companies really need to examine that as well.
In that context, that makes sense. If you're building something that's like their IP or something that's for them, that would make sense. But
yeah,
I don't have a degree, so I find it really hard to believe that you can go 4 years without having some sort of assignment where you can be like, I built this. Like, I don't get that. How is that happening?
Yeah, that makes sense in the context of a business, just because, you're being paid to build something like that. Is you are being compensated for this. You're not really being compensated at school. The value of a degree, you can argue what that piece of paper is worth, but like, you're not being compensated for your projects. Yeah. Like that's not how that works.
Like if I couldn't showcase the projects that I did in college, I wouldn't have a portfolio to show. So it's kind of like, it's weird that colleges wouldn't let you show coursework or like the final projects or something. Like even for my capstone, it's like, if I didn't have that to show, like, I don't know if I would have gotten a job or like some of the internships I got. So that's kind of scary. And I guess a plus for boot camps.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, what do you have to show for an internship? I really don't know. Maybe it's worth investigating some of the contracts students are signing.
Well, okay,
So with
in defense of internships, showing that you have an internship on your resume when a recruiter is looking at that does tell them that you have at least some real world experience. Like in a professional setting, you had a job of some kind, and like people relied on you to do that job. Like that, it's separate from education, right? An internship is, while you can make it like, interns are underpaid or all that thing, or like it's just busy work or whatever. At the end of the day, when a recruiter looks at your resume, like they're generally going to skim it. And if they see that you have any work experience, even if it's an internship, that is a plus. And it's viewed differently than education.
Okay, what I'm saying is, yes, 100% agree with you. What I'm saying is, how do internships know what you can produce? Like how, because you have no projects to showcase them. I do agree that internships you should be putting them on your resume, but it wasn't like the value of internships. It was just like, how do you sell yourself to an internship if college is restricting you?
Well, if they don't restrict your transcript, you can show them your transcript. And if they say, oh, you're a CS major and you have a 3.0 or 4.0 GPA, like you probably understand the concepts well enough to get a 4.0 GPA, whatever university you're at. That's means you probably can perform in a professional setting. So I think transcripts are a way to, like, I guess, measure your performance without a portfolio. But I have never been asked what my college GPA was, like even before I went into software development. So
mine's like a 2.7 actually. It's super low. I did not want to finish that psychology degree. I just didn't. I honestly didn't. It was Japanese for me. I couldn't complete it. It was like, I don't know why I chose that language to begin with, because I like Japan. I want to visit Japan, but it's like that language, it was just so difficult for me to learn it. I don't know.
Wait, did you really learn Japanese?
Yeah, a while ago. Don't ask me to speak it.
Learning Japanese right now.
That's awesome. How you liking it?
Oh, no, it's pretty hectic, but I mean, I love learning stuff, clearly, so why not? I'm learning React Native Japanese and then also going through cracking the coding interview.
I have that one over there. I'm going through elements of programming interviews in Python. Cracking the coding interview is a good one, though.
I've heard great things about it.
Yeah.
What language is that in? Cracking the coding interview.
I think it's in Java.
It's in Java.
Java.
I think they have versions in other ones. I'm not sure. I think someone told me that, but the one I have is in Java, and the one that I've seen has been in Java.
Yeah, I think the book's in Java, but I definitely found a repo where someone went through the solutions doing them in JavaScript. So I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what have you ever looked at averages, like what you get from a CS degree versus a coding bootcamp with your first position as a software engineer?
Are you talking in terms of salary or
Average salary? Yeah.
I have not. No.
I don't know that there's a difference, to be honest with you. At least with the market in Miami, when I was first looking for a job, there wasn't really a distinction for when I went to interviews about like, oh, if you went to school, like you're in a different pay range. It was kind of just, if you went to school or you went to a boot camp, you're starting off at the same, like you don't have like professional experience, so you're starting off at the bottom rung. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was hard to find specifically for a software engineer. I think like average for a coding bootcamp was around 70 all around, and like average for a CS degree it ranged so much, but like anywhere from like 50 to 100,000. I think it kind of leaned more towards 80 or 90,000, but it didn't specify like software engineers compared to other professions.
Well, I think a lot of that is also based off of like where you are. Like, I mean, I have friends who have, like out of App Academy, they got jobs as software engineers in like Connecticut or Ohio, and they're making like 70 to 80, which is like low for New York, but like for Ohio and Connecticut, that's buku bucks. Like they're doing great. So I mean, I think average, like when you're looking at average salary rates, it's important to look at like where in the country you're making, like what that money is. And I think a lot of these coding boot camps, at least in the past, have been located in like the Bay Area and in like, New York, like tech areas where there's a lot of tech jobs, and that kind of like tends to they try to like, that kind of brings their numbers up a bit to like, just to play devil's advocate. I mean, it does, because if you
the cost of living,
it's
stupid.
It's a stupid high here. It's insane. Yeah, but I'd be interested to see like what, say, a New York boot camp versus like NYU CS degree. If they get a job in New York, what that average first salary is. But I think that's a hard metric to capture, I think, just because there's a lot of confounding variables there.
I was looking for Chicago. It's pretty hard. I couldn't get any data for that. So I made this statement earlier that within 5 years, under 50% of people, under 50% of newer software engineers would have a CS degree. Do you guys agree with that or disagree?
Under 50% of incoming junior developers.
I think that's very reasonable, personally. I think that what's happening right now with colleges and specifically computer science degrees, I would probably compare it, and maybe this isn't the best comparison, but kind of like the movie industry way before streaming platforms, where it just got to the point where it was getting ridiculously expensive. No one wanted to go to the movies or to buy Blu-ray, so they were pirating everything. So you end up having it's bleeding out. Everyone's just stealing the content. So then you have the birth of streaming platforms. I think that the streaming platforms for computer science degrees is, Udemy, Treehouse, being able to have this easy to access content where I don't have to go to a 4-year college and get a degree. And I think that we're going to start seeing that shift of like people are going to be less willing to like own content, and they're going to be fine with just, going the shorter route, and that's more practical for them, something that's more convenient. People will always shift towards what's more convenient for them.
The average cost of attending college, I think, has gone up by from the 80s to, recent years. I think it's gone up like 500%, more than twice the rate of inflation. So I think when you look at the number of college degrees out there, I think it's becoming less important just because less people are going to be able to afford that. The price just keeps going up, and at a faster rate than people are going to be able to pay for it. So greater than 50%. I mean, I want to see what the numbers are now, as far as who's out there applying. That's because it might be close to that now. If you really look at, there's a lot of boot camps out there. There's a lot of self-taught people out there. I think there's plenty of people who are applying for jobs that don't have 4-year degrees. I think whether or not they're getting accepted into jobs, I think the resources are improving. I mean, with things like, Udemy, like you're saying, like the advent of like things like Udemy and all these online resources, like there's tons of stuff out there, and more people are going to go out of their way to use those materials because, as information becomes more accessible, more people are going to have it. I think we're definitely going to see less people with 4-year degrees in computer science junior dev jobs. I think there, some roles, well, not even that, because like the idea that like, oh, well, this computer science job is way too difficult for a boot camp, I think is kind of ridiculous, because that people would say that about any computer science job. Like if you go back 10 years, I mean, at the end of the day, when you're working a job and you don't have the answer right in front of you, you look it up. And that's the same whether you're on the job or whether you're learning something outside of your job. So I really think it's going to go down with how accessible information is. Like there's people out there who have like machine learning tutorials on YouTube. Like I was following one the other day where it's like how to build basically a smart assistant, like an Alexa, with your just with like a Raspberry Pi and using like TensorFlow. Like, so like there's the complicated, like really fundamental CS stuff out there. There's resources out there to learn it quickly. So I think it's very likely that, most CS degrees are going to become obsolete moving forward.
Well, and maybe this brings us back to the questions. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 5 years. But Evan, you mentioned, like CS degrees are for some people. Who would you say CS degrees are for, and who would you say alternative education is for?
Oof. I think if you have the means for it, I think with formal education, if like you really get value out of kind of like a slower pace of education where it's kind of like almost one-on-one, you're not rushed through it. Like you have others going through the same process as you, like in the same time frame. Cause I feel like with the boot camps, like they're like super intensive. And I don't know if like everybody kind of wants that intensity to get like market ready. Some people like might want to take a slower roll into it. They might want to like get some of these internships in some of these programs and see the appeal of them. And I just feel like if sitting down in a classroom at like a slower pace is for you, and like you see the value of like a degree, and the degree like has some personal value for you, then like, sure. But if you're not about the degree, you kind of just like want to get from A to B, or like want to be market ready, and like, you want this and don't want to have to sit for 4 years, then I feel like it's just a personal choice, not like it's really case by case. Like, I don't know. My first 3 years at a ad agency was pretty much like a boot camp, where it's just like project after project after project. And it's like, I'm glad I'm at product now where I can like slow down a bit. Cause I don't think at like when I went through college, I would have been able to complete a boot camp. Now, maybe. But I think the pacing that I had in college was like perfect for me. And the way that I learn was perfect for me. So it's really a personal call.
That's fair. I mean, not everyone makes it through the boot camps. Like there are boot camp dropouts. Oh, it is fast paced and not. That's totally fair.
I like too. If I had tried to do it in college, it would not have ended well. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have ended well.
Yeah. Like I know someone when I was living in California, she kind of like, we would play dodgeball together, and she was like, yeah, I got to cut this out. I got to like focus like my entire life on this coding boot camp. I'm like, oh my God, that's intense. Like, more power to you. Cause I know like the way that I'm set up, I could not, like I can do it for like a short burst of time, but for like hours on days, on weeks, it's like, no, I'd burn out. Like I burned out several times in college, but like I kind of pushed through. I couldn't imagine like burning out successively, like over a 3-month period. I praise y'all for going through boot camps, because like I know I could not do it.
It was crazy. I was taking like, because I didn't have like a New York apartment yet. I was like staying with like a family member out like way out on Long Island by like Belrose. So I was taking like the 6 a.m. train into Penn Station every morning, and then studying from like 7:30 a.m. when I got there till like 10 when I left. It was
wow, yeah,
brutal.
Yeah, I did the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that, Evan, I think about what you said is very true. That once you get to that point of like choosing to go to a boot camp, you've kind of already found your intrinsic motivation and said, I'm doing this because of X, Y, and Z. And once you have that, I think it makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have that in college. I couldn't make a commitment to anything. And then once I finally was able to make the commitment, that just made the whole, that made all the difference.
So I kind of compare coding boot camps to what the military does. The military, of course,
actual
they're both boot camps. So actual boot camps, because I have family that went into the military, and I have a lot of respect for military. But what they teach you is what you're actually capable of more than you ever do. And they push you harder than you ever knew possible. And they help you discover how strong you really are. That's one good thing that the military does well. And coding boot camps kind of do the same thing mentally. A lot of people feel like, I'm not ready for this intense venture. I'm not ready to go 3 months, 6 months into this, nonstop full-time coding boot camp. This is insane. I've never done this. How can I stick with this? And I think one thing, this is why I think a lot of people should reconsider a full-time intensive program, because it teaches you what you're capable of. When, we all know, in the software engineering industry, crunch time hits. And the software engineering industry brings a lot of pressure, usually with deadlines, and usually with a lot of user feedback, and a lot of other stuff. But it teaches you to be able to withstand that. It teaches you that you are capable of withstanding this mental anguish and this pressure and this just intensity for a longer period than you ever thought was possible. That's what it taught me. And this is why you hear people coming out of coding boot camps, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, because mentally, it's funny because a lot of people that say that usually have grown from that experience as well. But I'm under the impression you push yourself as hard as you possibly can. You train way harder than you need to. So when the day comes where you need to perform, you execute at least most of the way there. You have to I think people underestimate what they're capable of, and the harder you do push yourself, the more you realize you're going to be able to execute in the real world. This is why I love coding boot camps. This is what I think they do really well. It's kind of just, I guess, an analogy or whatever you would call it, but I do look at it similar to boot camps in the way that they just teach you how strong you really are.
Absolutely. I felt like I had a similar revelation going through the boot camp and having a reminder of when I went through 2 days playing football in high school. I remember my cardio was the worst. I was built like a receiver, but I decided to try out as a defensive lineman because I hated running. And I remember those bleachers, once the sun was coming up and you already worked out in the morning and it's the afternoon now and it's the hot Miami sun, man, it made you feel like you were going to pass out. But I survived every day and I figured out how to get home and I came back the next day. So it was that same feeling of, I have no idea how I survived today. It was I felt like I blacked out and I just did what I had to do. And you're forced to adapt to survive,
Yeah. I think that's another really good story. And I'm just going to say it with a lot of our younger generations. That's fine. Cancel me. I think there's a lot of entitlement. There's not a lot of just standing, there's not a lot of grit. There's not a lot of executing over and over and over to improve. I think as a society, at least in the US, we're kind of training people to just get by as with the least amount of effort as possible. And I'm scared of that. And even during COVID, I find that people that are getting positions are resilient. They're tenacious and they're connecting with everyone on LinkedIn. And they're doing everything that they need to do and more to be able to get that position and get that competitive edge. This is why I like coding boot camps so much, is because they instill the strength for you to be able to do this and for you to have the capacity to be able to do this. I think that's why I'm I've really investigated coding boot camps and where it's going to be leading the software engineering industry.
I think the industry being more open to those alternate forms of education is important too. Yeah. Because 5-6 years ago, they're what boot camps? Why? Yeah. Now it's we can find smart people anywhere. Okay, great. We are opening up the doors for everyone. When I worked at Slack, I think they have a program called Slack for Good where they taught formerly incarcerated folks job skills for computer science and to get them job ready for tech. And some of like another smart, like ridiculously smart person that I knew came from this program was like, yeah, you can find talent anywhere. It's just kind of like are you applied enough to kind of dedicate it? And if that's through college and you want to take the hit in your pocket, that's fine. If it's through a boot camp, great. If it's self-taught and you already have that kind of motivation yourself, then it's fine. Like college like overall isn't the only path forward, but I think especially for tech, it's like becoming a diminishing return.
I agree. All right, I think we all kind of laid our thoughts on the table. I think this is a good conversation. Any final thoughts or advice for aspiring developers? Feel free to take a minute.
Where to start?
Yeah.
I'll say a couple things. One, I think it's really, really important to remember how we got here and why colleges have gotten so expensive. And from my perspective, I think it's because they used to have a monopoly on the content that they were teaching you. It used to be that if you wanted to learn something, you had to go to a library or you had to go to a school and have them teach you. There was no other alternative. Now that's not the case because of the advent of the internet and because tech and coding in general just tends to trend towards open source and wanting to share information and helping each other out. It's very archaic to think that your only route is a degree. I implore you to do your research. If you're thinking about going to a boot camp or doing self-learning, do your research. Just because people expect you to go to school or expect you to get a degree or whatever, listen, it's your life. Figure it out for yourself. If you want to try something and not have to be in debt for the rest of your life, do that. Do that. No one's stopping you. You're in control of your life. But I know that I personally allowed myself to make decisions based off of expectations. And then I had to double down and triple down and change majors and pre-med. And listen, you don't need to do that. Take your time, try it out. The last thing I'll say is that with 4-year degrees for tech, the platform is not conducive to the content. By that, I mean, tech is changing so rapidly. I mean, every year there's another JavaScript library. I mean, not even every year. Every year there's probably several JavaScript libraries coming out. How often can you change the curriculum at a school? How long does that take? And then once you finally change it, now the teacher has to change the lesson plan. And at the end of the day, we've been talking about how, and I spoke to a recruiter about this the other day, they're not getting practical experience, or they don't have projects to show. It's like, so it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. They can't keep up with the tech. It's too expensive. Do your own research. Take everything I say with a grain of salt or a whole handful of salt and throw it over your shoulder or whatever you want to do. But please think about it. I think boot camps are the way to go. And if not, self-learning is very strong too if you feel that you're disciplined.
I love that. That was really good.
Thank you.
That's really good. Should we end on that? Unless anyone else.
Okay. I mean, I was gonna say it's not your aptitude, it's your attitude. So like a lot of folks, and myself included, got really intimidated when I was working around folks who had like these higher degrees and like from prestigious colleges, but it wasn't really. I didn't need to be the smartest person in the room. I just needed to be willing to work as hard or harder. So like if you feel like you can do that, whether in college or boot camps, it's like just apply yourself and like you'll be surprised where you go. Because like I said, a lot of folks that I've worked with just busted their ass and like got further than folks with degrees. So it's not a determinant of how far you'll go.
Yeah,
that's a good life lesson.
I think with regards to just the tech industry in general, for people who are just like, maybe just starting out and like trying to decide how to get into this field, getting the first job is the hardest one, but like way more valuable than, where you went to school or is just like having that experience. So like, you just kind of have to start, learning one way or another. And, it gets easier as time goes on. Like it'll be hard at first, but then like the more you work at it, the more you work to improve, you're gonna find more and more doors opening for you. And I think that's just kind of how this industry's been.
Absolutely. All really good advice. All right. I think that's a good place to end. Let's go ahead and wrap it up here. Anyone in the comments, let me know what you think. We're kind of challenging CS degrees and that old model altogether. I think we talked about, CS degrees still have a place. They do. And sometimes this is going to fit the right attitude, the right personality. But Henry, I especially like what you said, screw what we say, do your own research. Look into this. Yeah. And I think that's what we're encouraging overall. But if you disagree, I would love to hear about it. Please disagree with me. If you agree, I'd love to hear about it. Tell me your ideas. Why do you think a CS degree should stick around? Why do you think it should be tossed out the window? Let me know in the comments below. But let's go ahead and do our outros. Evan, if people want to reach out to you, where could they reach you?
LinkedIn. I'm at, what's my name? Evan Vaughn. And then on Twitter, because I'm starting to use that again, my handle is elvaughno. EL_VAUGHNO.
Sounds good. How about you, Nicholas?
LinkedIn. I know I've had a few people reach out to me about App Academy from the last podcast.
Cool.
I'm Nicholas Schneider on there. I'm also streaming on Twitch at Karate Man John without the H. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions about App Academy or anything. LinkedIn, Twitch, you name it, I'll respond.
Okay, cool. Without naming any names, I'm just curious, what were a couple things they reached out to you for?
It was mainly people who were about to go into the App Academy program and they wanted my opinion, just what should I be on the look, based on, here's my story. Is this a good fit for me? Am I making the right decision? And usually it was, it's just people wanting advice as to whether or not it's right for them. So.
Okay, cool. I started putting these LinkedIn links in the show notes a while ago. I wasn't sure people were clicking them, and then people are reaching out to me saying tons of people are starting to reach out to them. So that I think that's really cool. All right, how about you, Henry?
You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Henry Dose. Dose spelled DOCE. I'm hoping that in the near future I'll have some more platforms to plug there. So I'm going to hopefully take care of that soon.
I'm excited for that. I'm looking forward to it. All right. Let me know what you think. Please be loud about it. If you want me to talk more about this, dive deeper into it, or any other topics, let me know. Happy to do it. But Evan, Nicholas, Henry, thanks so much for hopping on. It's good visiting with you again. Definitely a pleasure seeing you. So, thank you.
Likewise. It was a pleasure coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man.